The frozen moon of 4 had no sun. It circled a dead gas giant at the edge of Coalition space, and the only light came from distant stars that looked like chips of ice scattered across black cloth. The temperature never rose above -50 degrees. Nothing lived here. Nothing was supposed to live here. But for 19 days, 206 soldiers had been dying here slowly. Commander stood at the observation window of the abandoned mining outpost. He was, which meant he stood nearly 3 meters tall, with gray skin that looked like stone and eyes that glowed soft orange in the darkness. He had fought in 11 campaigns across 30 years. He had never lost a battle he could win. This battle he could not win. Outside the reinforced glass, the enemy siege engines sat in perfect formation. The Imperium had sent 12,000 soldiers to crush his battalion. They had plasma shields that stopped any aircraft from landing. They had artillery that could level mountains. And they had patience. They did not need to attack. They simply needed to wait. Turned away from the window, his soldiers were scattered throughout the outpost, huddled in small groups for warmth. The heating systems had failed on day 7. The food supplies had run out on day 12. The medical bay had stopped accepting new patients on day 15 because there was nothing left to treat them with. Lieutenant approached him. She was a species with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors with emotion. Right now her skin was pale gray. Fear, exhaustion, acceptance. "Commander," she said quietly, "we have lost 3 more overnight, cold exposure." Closed his eyes. Who? Sergeant Private Torres, Private Chalk. 3 more names to add to the list. 27 dead since the siege began, not from enemy fire, from cold, from hunger, from the slow failure of bodies that were never meant to survive in a place like this. "How are the others?" asked. Skin flickered darker. "Morale is failing, sir. Some are talking about surrender. Others are talking about a final charge against the enemy lines. Both options end the same way." "I know, sir." Walked through the outpost, checking on his soldiers. They were a mixed battalion, drawn from a dozen different species. Warriors with stone-hard skin, scouts with their color-changing camouflage, engineers who could repair anything with their 6-fingered hands, tall, thin who could see in complete darkness. And one human. Private sat alone in a corner of the supply room. He was small by human standards, maybe 70 kilograms, with a thin face and dark hair that had grown too long during the siege. He wore the same uniform as everyone else, but it hung loose on his frame. He was a logistics clerk. He had been transferred to the battalion 6 months ago to help manage supply chains. He had never been meant for combat. Had almost forgotten he existed. The human was doing something strange. He had a small notebook in his hands, and he was writing in it with intense focus. His lips moved silently as he worked through some kind of calculation. Private said. Looked up, his eyes were tired, but there was something else there too, something could not quite identify. "Sir, what are you doing?" Hesitated. "Math, sir, just keeping my mind busy." Nodded and moved on. He had more important things to worry about than a clerk doing arithmetic. In the command center, Chief Engineer was arguing with the other officers. Was human too, though he had served with alien forces for so long that he sometimes forgot it. He was older than maybe 40, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands from decades of repair work. "The siege gate is our only option," was saying. "If we could open it, we could flank their position, catch them off guard." "The siege gate is impossible," Lieutenant Mora snapped. She was short and stocky, with 6 arms that moved constantly when she was frustrated. 30 meters of steel, temperature maintained at -200 degrees by thermal regulators. Even our heavy weapons could not scratch it. "Then we find another way." "There is no other way." Mora slammed 2 of her fists on the table. "The walls are solid rock. The tunnels are collapsed. The only exit is through the main entrance, and that is where 12,000 soldiers are waiting for us. Fell silent. Everyone knew Mora was right. Stepped into the room. How long do we have? The officers looked at each other, finally spoke. 3 days, sir, maybe 4. After that we will be too weak to fight, even if we wanted to. 3 days had led soldiers through impossible situations before. He had turned defeats into victories through cunning and courage. But this was different. This was mathematics. They did not have the weapons to break through. They did not have the ships to fly out. They did not have the strength to fight. They were going to die here, on a frozen moon that did not even have a name worth remembering. That night sat alone in his quarters. He thought about sending a final message to Coalition Command, but communications had been jammed since day 3. He thought about writing letters to the families of his soldiers, but there was no way to deliver them. He thought about giving up. In the supply room was still writing. His notebook was almost full now. Pages and pages of numbers, diagrams, calculations. His hands were shaking from the cold, but he did not stop. He was thinking about his grandmother. She had been a diver in Korea, a woman who swam in freezing water to harvest seafood. She had worked until she was 70 years old. Her hands had been rough as leather, her lungs strong as iron. She had never complained about the cold. Cold is just a feeling, she used to tell him. Feelings can be ignored. Looked at his calculations one more time. The numbers made sense. The biology made sense. The physics made sense. It was insane. It was impossible. It would probably kill him. But it might work. He closed his notebook and stood up. His legs were weak from hunger, but they still held him. He walked toward the command center, past soldiers who did not even look up as he passed. He was nobody, a clerk, a number on a roster. But he was also human, and humans had done impossible things before. He pushed open the door to the command center. "Commander," he said, "I have an idea." Command center fell silent when entered. Every officer turned to look at him. A logistics clerk, thin and tired, standing in the doorway like he had something important to say. Commander frowned. "Private, this is a command meeting." "I know, sir," did not move, "but I have a solution." Lieutenant Mora laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "A clerk has a solution. Wonderful. Did you find extra food in your spreadsheets?" "No, ma'am. I found a way to open the siege gate." The laughter stopped. Everyone stared at him. Stepped forward, explain. Walked to the center of the room. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. He placed his notebook on the table and opened it to a page filled with calculations. "The siege gate is 30 meters of steel," he said. "It is maintained at -200 degrees by thermal regulators. The locking mechanism requires 16 tons of rotational force to open. Our heavy weapons cannot damage it. Our engineers cannot hack it. By every reasonable measure, it is impossible to breach." "We know all this," said softly. Her skin was flickering with impatience. "Yes, but you are thinking about it like soldiers, like engineers." Looked around the room. "I am thinking about it like a human." Engineer leaned forward. He was the only other human in the room, and something in his voice had caught his attention. "What do you mean?" Turned to a new page. There were diagrams of human biology, charts showing temperature tolerance, graphs of muscular output. "Earth is what other species call a death world," said. "The gravity is heavy. The temperature varies by over 100 degrees between seasons. The atmosphere is filled with oxygen, which is basically slow poison. The planet is covered with predators, diseases, natural disasters. Everything on Earth is trying to kill everything else, all the time." He paused. "Humans evolved there. We survived there. For 200,000 years, we lived on a planet that should have killed us every single day." Mora crossed 4 of her arms. "This is a biology lesson, not a battle plan." "It is both," pointed to one of his charts. Human body temperature is 37 degrees. We maintain that temperature constantly, even in extreme cold. Our metabolism generates enormous heat. We can survive exposure to temperatures that would kill most species in minutes. The gate is at negative 200 degrees, said. No species can survive contact with that. You are right. No species should be able to, met the commander's eyes. But humans have done things we should not be able to do. We have climbed mountains where the air is too thin to breathe. We have crossed deserts with no water for days. We have swum in frozen oceans and walked through burning fires. He turned to another page. I have done the calculations. A human body properly prepared can survive brief contact with extreme cold. The key is blood flow. Humans can redirect blood from our extremities to our core, protecting vital organs while sacrificing fingers, toes, hands, feet. Sacrificing, skin went pale. Yes, the cold will damage my hands, severely, possibly permanently. His voice did not waver, but I will survive long enough to reach the gate. Stood up, his face was troubled. And then what? Even if you reach it, even if you touch it, how do you open it? The locking mechanism requires 16 tons of force. Human muscles are different from other species, said. We evolved for endurance, for persistence hunting. Our ancestors chased prey for hours, for days, until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. But we also evolved for bursts of extreme strength. Under stress, our bodies release chemicals that temporarily increase our power far beyond normal limits. He held up his hands. They were thin, ordinary, unremarkable. My grandfather worked construction in Ulsan. He once lifted a steel beam off a who was trapped underneath. The beam weighed 400 kilograms. He should not have been able to move it, but he did because his friend was dying. That is one story, Mora said. It does not prove anything. There are thousands of stories like it. Mothers lifting cars off their children. Soldiers carrying wounded comrades for kilometers. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things because they refused to accept that something was impossible. Closed his notebook. I am not special, I am not strong, I am not brave, but I am human, and humans have been doing impossible things since before we had words to describe them. Commander was silent for a long moment. His orange eyes studied like he was seeing him for the first time. You would die, said finally. Even if you reached the gate, even if you somehow opened it, the cold would kill you. Maybe, nodded. But if I do nothing, I die anyway. We all die. At least this way there is a chance. A small chance. A chance is more than we have now. The room was quiet. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen surface of 4. Somewhere in the outpost, a soldier coughed weakly. Spoke first. I cannot support this. You are asking a young man to walk to his death. I am not asking, said. I am volunteering. Why? Asked. Her voice was soft, confused. Why would you do this? Thought about the question. He thought about his mother, who had worked 2 jobs to send him to school. He thought about his sister, who had beaten cancer through sheer stubbornness. He thought about his grandmother, diving into freezing water day after day because her family needed to eat. Because I can, he said simply. Because I might be the only one who can. And because if I do not try, I will spend my last 3 days alive knowing I could have done something and chose not to. Made his decision. When would you go? Felt something shift in the room. The impossible had become possible. Tonight, 300 hours. The sensors are calibrated for vehicles and armed soldiers. A single unarmored human walking slowly through the cold will not register as a threat. They will not see me coming. And if they do see you? Smiled. It was a tired, sad smile. Then I will be one more body on the ice, but at least I will be a body that tried. Extended his massive hand. It was a gesture of respect among the, offered only to warriors who had proven themselves in battle. You have not fought yet, said, but you have the heart of a soldier, private. shook the commander's hand. This grip was cold and hard as stone. "I have the heart of a human," said. "Tonight, we will see if that is enough." At 2:47 hours, stood at the emergency exit of the mining outpost. He had removed his thermal jacket. He had removed his insulated gloves. He wore only his base uniform, a thin layer of fabric that offered almost no protection against the cold. Behind him, a small group had gathered to watch. Commander, lieutenant, engineer, a few soldiers who had heard what was about to happen. Nobody spoke. Looked at his hands one last time. They were ordinary hands, soft from years of desk work, the hands of a clerk, not a warrior. In a few minutes they would be something else entirely. He had spent the last 3 hours preparing. Controlled breathing exercises to slow his heart rate, light physical activity to raise his core temperature. Mental visualization, techniques his grandmother had taught him when he was young and afraid of the ocean. "The cold is not your enemy," she used to say. "The cold is just the cold. Your mind is your enemy. Your fear is your enemy. Control your mind and the cold cannot touch you." He was not sure if he believed that anymore, but he was going to find out. Stepped forward, his face was tight with worry. "The gate is 400 meters from this exit," he said. "At a steady walking pace, that is approximately 11 minutes. The temperature outside is -63 degrees. Human exposure time at that temperature, unprotected, is approximately 8 to 12 minutes before critical hypothermia sets in." "So I have a small window," said. "Very small, and that assumes you maintain movement. If you stop, if you fall, the cold will take you in seconds." "Then I will not stop." Lieutenant's skin was cycling through colors rapidly. Blue, gray, white, back to blue. Did not know what that meant, but he thought it might be sadness. "Private," she said, "I want you to know that what you are doing is. I do not have words for it. In my culture, we do not have a concept for someone who walks willingly toward death. In my culture, we call it being stubborn," smiled slightly. "Koreans are very stubborn people." Commander checked his timepiece. 2:58, 2 minutes. Nodded, he turned to face the door. Through the small window, he could see the frozen wasteland of 4. The ice glittered faintly under the distant stars. The siege gate was out there somewhere, invisible in the darkness. "I am ready." Grabbed his arm. "Wait, there is something I need to tell you." Turned. "I have been serving with alien species for 20 years, said. "I forgot what it meant to be human. I forgot what we are capable of. I forgot that we come from a world that tried to kill us every day and we survived anyway." His voice cracked. "Whatever happens tonight, you reminded me. Thank you." Placed his hand overs. "Tell my mother I was thinking of her, if this does not work." "It will work." "Maybe, but if it does not." Nodded. "I will tell her." 300 hours, the door opened. The cold hit like a physical blow. It was not like anything he had ever experienced. It was not the cold of winter in Korea, or the cold of a freezer, or the cold of ice water. It was a cold that seemed to have weight, that pressed against his skin and tried to crush him. He stepped outside. The door closed behind him. For a moment he could not move. His body screamed at him to turn back, to find warmth, to survive. Every instinct he had was telling him that this was death, that he was walking into death, that he needed to stop. He took another step. The wind cut through his uniform like it was not there. His skin began to burn with cold. His lungs ached as he breathed air that felt like broken glass. He kept walking. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. He counted his steps. It gave him something to focus on, something other than the cold. 1, 2, 3, 4. His fingers were already going numb. He flexed them as he walked, trying to maintain blood flow. It did not help much. 23, 24, 25. He thought about his grandmother. She had dived into the ocean when the water was barely above freezing. She had stayed under for minutes at a time, gathering abalone and sea urchins. She had done it every day for 50 years. "The sea is cold," she had told him once, "but my will is colder." 58, 59, 60. His feet were losing feeling now. He could still walk, but each step felt strange, like he was walking on wooden blocks instead of flesh. 112, 113. The siege gate appeared in the darkness ahead. It was enormous, a wall of black metal that blocked the only path through the mountains. Frost covered its surface in thick layers. Even from a distance could feel the cold radiating from it. The thermal regulators kept it at -200 degrees, cold enough to freeze carbon dioxide out of the air, cold enough to turn human flesh to ice in seconds. He kept walking. 189, 190. Behind him in the outpost, the soldiers were watching through thermal sensors. They saw his heat signature moving slowly across the frozen ground, a small bright spot in a world of darkness. "He is still moving," whispered. "How?" Mora demanded. "How is he still moving?" Did not answer. He was watching the screen with absolute focus. 234, 235. Could not feel his hands anymore. He could not feel his feet. His face was a mask of ice. His eyelashes had frozen together, and he had to force them open with every blink. But he could still see the gate. It was closer now. 50 meters, 40, 30. He was going to make it. 20 meters, 15. His legs gave out. He fell forward onto the ice. The impact barely registered. His body was too cold to feel pain anymore. For a long moment he lay there. The cold pressed down on him like a blanket made of stone. It would be so easy to close his eyes, so easy to rest, so easy to let the darkness take him. He thought about his sister, Park. When she was 12, the doctors had told her she would die. Cancer had spread through her body. There was nothing they could do. She had refused to believe them. For 2 years she had fought, through surgery, through treatment, through pain that no child should ever have to endure. She had fought because she was too stubborn to die. She was 24 now, healthy, alive, because she had refused to give up. Pushed himself up onto his knees, then onto his feet. The gate was 10 meters away. He walked the last 10 meters on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. His vision was going dark at the edges. His heart was slowing down. His body was shutting down. But he reached the gate. He stood before 30 meters of steel, frozen to -200 degrees, and he raised his hands. This was it. This was the moment. He placed his palms against the metal. The cold hit him like nothing he had ever imagined. It was beyond pain. It was beyond sensation. It was the cold of space, the cold of absolute zero, the cold of death itself. His hand stuck to the metal instantly. Skin fused to steel. Blood crystallized in his veins. And logistics clerk, grandson of a diver, began to push. In the command center, every screen went white. "What happened?" demanded. "Where is he?" Engineer was staring at the thermal display. His hands were shaking. "He is at the gate, but the readings, this cannot be right." "Show me." Adjusted the sensors. The image cleared, and what they saw made no sense. His heat signature was blazing. His body, which should have been cooling rapidly in the -63-degree air, was generating heat like a small furnace. The area around his hands was actually warming the metal surface of the gate. "How is this possible?" asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Adrenaline," said. "Norepinephrine, cortisol. His body is flooding itself with every stress hormone it has. He is burning through his reserves, turning everything he has into raw thermal energy." He paused. "It is killing him, but it is also keeping him alive." At the gate was screaming. He could not hear himself over the wind. He could not feel his hands anymore, could not feel anything below his wrists. But he could feel the cold trying to take him, trying to reach his heart, trying to freeze him solid. He pushed back. His muscles contracted with everything he had. Every fiber, every cell, every molecule of his body focused on one single action. Push. Push harder. Push until something breaks. The metal groaned. Heard it through the pain, a deep, low sound like a giant waking from sleep. The gate was feeling his pressure. The gate was responding. He pushed harder. Blood was flowing from where his hands were fused to the metal. It froze instantly, forming red crystals that glittered in the starlight. His skin was tearing. His flesh was separating from bone. He was literally ripping himself apart. But he did not stop. He thought about his friend, Han. 3 years ago, they had been hiking in the mountains when had fallen and broken his leg. They were 30 kilometers from the nearest road. There was no cell signal, no way to call for help. Had walked. For 6 hours with a broken tibia he had walked. He had passed out twice from pain. He had thrown up 4 times. He had screamed until his voice was gone. But he had kept walking because the alternative was dying alone on a mountain. That was what humans did. They kept going when they should have stopped. They survived when they should have died. They broke through walls that were supposed to be unbreakable. Screamed again and pushed. The metal cracked. In the command ship, alarms began to sound. "Commander," a technician called out, "we are detecting an anomaly at Siege Gate 7. The commander turned. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black stones. "What kind of anomaly?" "Thermal variance. The gate temperature is rising in a localized area." "Rising? That is impossible. The thermal regulators maintain exact temperature at all times." "Yes, sir, but the readings are clear. Something is generating heat at the gate's surface." The commander frowned. "Show me." The screen displayed a thermal image of the gate. There, clearly visible against the frozen metal, was a single bright spot. It was small, roughly human-shaped, and it was burning hot against the cold. "What is that?" The technician ran a scan. The results came back and his face went pale. "Sir, it is a human, an unarmored human. He is touching the gate." "That is impossible. Contact with the gate at that temperature would cause instant tissue death." "Yes, sir, but he is still moving. He is still." The technician stopped. "Sir, the gate integrity is failing. There is a crack forming in the primary structure." The commander stared at the screen. He had fought a dozen species across 100 worlds. He had seen soldiers perform acts of incredible bravery and endurance, but he had never seen anything like this. "How?" he asked. "How is one human doing this?" Nobody answered. At the gate, felt the crack form under his hands. It was not large, maybe a centimeter wide, but it was there. He had put a crack in 30 meters of military-grade steel. With his bare hands. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to cry. He wanted to collapse and let the cold finally take him, but he was not finished. The crack had exposed the edge of the emergency release mechanism. It was a manual override, designed to open the gate if the electronic systems failed. It required 16 tons of force to activate. Had maybe 200 kilograms of force left in his destroyed hands. But he also had something else, something that had never calculated, something no species in the galaxy truly understood. He had human stubbornness. He jammed his fingers into the crack. The metal cut into what was left of his flesh. He found the release lever, a thick bar of steel designed to be turned by heavy machinery. He grabbed it. He pulled. The lever did not move. He pulled harder. His shoulders screamed. His arms felt like they were being torn from their sockets. His spine compressed under the strain. The lever did not move. Closed his eyes. He thought about everyone who was depending on him. 200 soldiers trapped and dying. Commander who had shaken his hand like he was a warrior. Lieutenant who had no word for what he was doing. who had remembered what it meant to be human. He thought about his mother, who had never given up on anything in her life. His grandmother, who had dived into freezing water until she was 70 years old. His sister, who had beaten cancer through sheer force of will. He was the product of 1,000 generations of survivors, 1,000,000 years of evolution on a planet that wanted them dead, a species that had crawled out of the ocean, stood upright, conquered fire, and reached for the stars. He was human, and humans did not give up. Screamed one final time, and pulled with everything he had left. The lever moved. 1 centimeter, 2, 3. The mechanism engaged, gears turned, locks disengaged, the gate shuddered. And then slowly, impossibly, the siege gate began to open. In the command center, the soldiers watched in stunned silence as the gate swung wide. A path through the mountains, clear and open, a way out of the trap. He did it, whispered. Tears were freezing on his face. He actually did it. Commander was already moving. All units prepare for immediate assault. We move in 5 minutes. Sir called out, "What about Private?" Paused at the door. His orange eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "Bring him home," he said. "Whatever is left of him, bring him home." At the gate lay on the frozen ground. His hands were destroyed, frozen masses of blood and torn flesh. His body temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. His heart was barely beating. But he was smiling. He had done it, the impossible thing, the thing that no one believed could be done. He had cracked the siege gate barehanded. As the darkness closed in around him, he heard something in the distance. Shouting, gunfire, the sound of 200 soldiers charging through the gate he had opened. Then strong hands lifted him from the ice, and he knew nothing more. The Battle of 4 lasted 6 hours. They had not expected an attack. They had calculated every possibility, every variable, every outcome. Their siege was perfect. Their position was unbreakable. They had 12,000 soldiers and overwhelming firepower. What they had not calculated was a single human walking through lethal cold to crack open a gate that should have been impossible to breach. When the 47th Battalion poured through the opening, they were still trying to understand what had happened. Their command structure collapsed in minutes. Their defensive positions, all facing the wrong direction, were useless. By the time they organized a response, it was too late. Commander led the charge himself. The old fought like he was young again, his stone-hard fists crushing enemy soldiers, his voice roaring commands across the battlefield. Lieutenant and her scouts moved like ghosts through the chaos, their color-changing skin making them nearly invisible. Even the wounded joined the fight. Soldiers who had not eaten in days, who could barely stand, picked up weapons and pushed forward. They were not fighting for victory anymore. They were fighting for the man who had given them a chance. When the sun rose over the frozen moon, it illuminated a battlefield covered with dead. The 47th Battalion had lost 12 soldiers. The enemy had lost everything. The first rescue ship arrived 3 hours later. By then had been in emergency surgery for 2 hours. The medical team worked with desperate focus, trying to save what was left of his hands. The damage was severe. Frostbite had destroyed most of the tissue. The bones were cracked from the pressure he had exerted. The nerves were damaged beyond easy repair. "We can save his life," the lead surgeon said, "but his hands, I do not know, the damage is extensive." Was waiting outside the surgical bay. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He just sat there staring at the door waiting for news. Commander found him there. "He is alive," said. Nodded, "I heard. They are trying to save his hands." "They will do what they can." Sat down beside the human engineer. "I have been a soldier for 30 years. I have seen many brave acts. I have never seen anything like what he did." "That is because you have never seen a human pushed to the limit," said quietly. "We are not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the, But when we decide to do something, when we truly commit ourselves, there is nothing in the universe that can stop us. Y asked, "What makes humans this way?" Thought about the question. He thought about Earth, the world he had left behind so many years ago. He thought about its oceans and mountains, its deserts and forests. He thought about all the ways that planet had tried to kill his ancestors, and all the ways they had refused to die. "Because we had to be," he said finally. "Our world gave us no choice. We evolved to survive no matter what. We evolved to push through pain, through fear, through impossible odds. It is in our blood, in our bones, in every cell of our bodies." He paused. "Is not special. He is not a super soldier or a genetic experiment. He is just a clerk from who did what any human would do when there was no other option." "I am not sure that is true," said. "I have known other humans. None of them would have done what he did." "Then you did not know them well enough, or they were never pushed far enough." Looked at the surgical bay door. Every human carries this inside them, the capacity for impossible things. Most of us never need to use it, but it is always there waiting. The surgery lasted 17 hours. When it was over, had hands again. They were stiff, and he would never have full feeling in them. The doctors said he would need months of rehabilitation. They said he would probably never regain full function. Did not care, he was alive. His battalion was alive, that was enough. The story spread quickly. First through military channels. Reports were filed, reviewed, shared between commands. Officers who had never heard of the 47th Battalion suddenly wanted to know everything about the Siege of 4. Then civilian networks picked it up. News services across a dozen worlds ran the story. The human who cracked a siege gate barehanded, the Earthborn terror, the clerk who would not die. Within a year, every species in the coalition knew his name. Recruitment centers reported a surge of interest in human soldiers. Commanders who had previously seen humans as weak, as fragile, as unsuited for combat, now specifically requested them. They wanted that stubbornness, that refusal to quit, that strange, terrifying capacity to do impossible things when pushed to the limit. And in barracks across the galaxy, veterans would gather new recruits close and tell them the story. "You want to know about Earthborn terror," they would say. "Let me tell you about Private. Let me tell you about the night he walked through killing cold and put his bare hands on a gate frozen to -200 degrees. Let me tell you how he screamed as his flesh froze to the metal, and how he kept pushing anyway. Let me tell you about the crack he put in 30 meters of military-grade steel." The new recruits would listen with wide eyes. Some of them would not believe it. Some would think it was just a story, exaggerated over time. But the veterans knew the truth. They had seen the footage. They had read the reports. They had talked to soldiers who were there. It was all true. Every word. 4 years after the Siege of 4 returned to Earth, his military service was complete. His hands had healed as much as they ever would. He was 27 years old and he was tired. He went home too. He bought a small shop near the harbor where his grandmother had once sold the seafood she harvested from the cold ocean. He sold fishing supplies to local fishermen. He lived quietly. Sometimes children would come into his shop. They would see the scars on his hands, the twisted fingers, the patches of pale skin where frostbite had killed the flesh. "Mister," they would ask, "what happened to your hands?" Would smile. He would flex his damaged fingers, feeling the old pain that never quite went away. "I held on," he would say, "when I should have let go." The children would nod, not really understanding. They would buy their fishing line or their hooks and they would leave. And would stand behind his counter, looking out at the ocean that had made his grandmother so strong. The same cold water, the same endless waves, the same stubborn people who had refused to give up for 1,000 generations. He was not a hero. He did not feel like one. He was just a man who had done what needed to be done. But sometimes, late at night, when the shop was closed and the harbor was quiet, he would look at his hands. He would remember the sound of metal cracking under his palms. He would remember the cold, so deep and complete that it had felt like death itself. And he would remember that he had beaten it, that he had done the impossible thing, that he had proven what humans were capable of when they refused to give up. The cold still visited him sometimes, phantom sensations in hands that would never fully heal. On warm days, he would suddenly feel it, that bone-deep chill, and he would have to stop and breathe until it passed. He never complained. It was a small price to pay for 200 lives, for proving that the human spirit could overcome anything, for becoming the legend that veterans whispered about in barracks across the galaxy. Earthborn terror. That was what they called him. He preferred to think of it as earthborn stubbornness, but he supposed it did not matter what you called it. What mattered was that it was real. And it always would be.